if we look to Gaza, if we look to Myanmar, as you mentioned, if we look to Sudan, if we look to Yemen, do you think people believe in humanitarian aid anymore? That's another example of frustration. That's another example of the imbalance of power.
The term decolonizing aid is everywhere. And yet, many decisions about aid are made behind closed doors in the West, and those most affected by aid policies have little power in shaping them.
When we discuss the future of the humanitarian sector, very often it's the same people who meet all the time. At some point, the conversation becomes a little bit repetitive.
There is acknowledgement and accepting the idea of needing to shift the power, but then in terms of implementing it, we're very slow. But we need to speed it up a bit because human lives are at risk. Things are getting worse. We can't wait for another 5 or 10 years to see another slight changes.
But what if people who are rarely in the same room together sit down and talk? No talking points, no self-censorship, just open, honest, and moderated one-on-one conversations.
The two of you haven't spoken ever before, correct?
First time.
No?
First time.
Introducing Power Shift, a new podcast from the New Humanitarian and the Center for Transformational Change.
I understand that change is incremental, but at the same time, things are getting extremely hectic on the field and on the ground. It feels like you're incapable of doing anything.
Power Shift is an experiment in dialogue between people across the power spectrum that asks, what's possible when decision makers and those affected by their decisions try to build relationships of trust?
I have been constantly fighting and reclaiming my space in this sector. Now, I have this leadership position, but then when lived experienced people come in this kind of decision-making leadership position, they then have this concern about, competency. Are you competent? And all of this. So it is constantly something that I have to fight.
I hope by the end of the 4 hours we will have discussed. I hope that Hafsar will have a better sense of how I reason, how I function, and how I can be helpful to this power shift.
Can a better understanding of each other's desires and constraints lead to acceptable outcomes for both sides?
I'm a little bit afraid that sometimes when you are working on the front line, you may underestimate the complexity of the reality at headquarters level.
It's interesting that we're going back to the headquarters because it feels like the whole system has been done in a top-down approach, while what we are asking here is to kind of reverse it.
What kinds of solutions can they co-create under the right conditions?
The issue of statelessness and the importance of dealing with it, we tend to talk about it from a theoretical point of view. And really that's something that when Hafsar was talking about the experience that they have gone through, that's clearly something that I found important to pursue.
Which differences are irreconcilable?
It might feel like I'm being too emotional, but this is the reality. This is how people are living, and this is how people are dying.
And is dialogue still worth the effort after all these years?
I know a lot of people are going to be very unhappy about what I'm saying, but I don't have any expectations of change within the UN system. I don't expect a conversation between a senior UN staffer is going to have any change.
Dialogue, and particularly facilitated dialogue, where you create a space for people to explore concepts together. It's a very catalytic and powerful tool. It's a small one. It is one piece of a puzzle. And I think actual mutual exchange of ideas and experience and story creates the basis for right relationship. It's a pivot point that I think we really need to foster.
Listen to Power Shift, coming soon to the New Humanitarians feed, wherever you get your podcasts.
At one point, the whole question goes back to, do we want to relinquish power or not?